Very excited for this session and our panelists. For today's session, as you all know, designing a roadmap for digital transformation. My name is Brian McGarvey. I lead our customer success team here, but obviously I'm not the star of the show. It's our three panelists here. So we have Wout from Bloom Energy, we have Pranav from Veka, and Mary from AWS. Give them an opportunity to give a quick background of yourselves and your company. Wout, let's start with you.
Yeah, so my name is Wout Mewison. I'm, as it shows there, I work for Bloom Energy. I've been there for about 12 years now. Bloom Energy, if you don't know, it's a Silicon Valley startup, or at least it was 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And we started a manufacturing plant here in Delaware, Newark, Delaware. So I joined right as that manufacturing plant was being built. In fact, we were sitting in trailers outside designing like the process flow and everything. There was like 3 or 4 engineers and like 15 operators at the time. And over time now, we've grown to about 500, 600 employees. So quite the manufacturing plant. And yeah, so there you can see some highlights of Bloom Energy. What we do is we make fuel cells. They are large-scale fuel cells, power buildings or entire you can see it there, up to between 30 kilowatts all the way to megawatts, and even a site that has a gigawatt rating. So definitely large-scale power generation. It's an efficient use of natural gas. So that's the company I work for. I started as a test engineer, and I was responsible for setting up the whole test department there in that plant. And then transitioned slowly to engineering management, and then manufacturing management, leading up to 70 employees, and then transitioned to IT as leading the digital transformation for our company, and then implementing Tulip is my primary role at the moment.
Awesome, thanks. Pranav, how about yourself?
Yeah, so Pranav Panikkal, I'm a process engineer. Sorry, I'm looking at Joe taking a photo of me. Got me distracted. All right, process engineer. I've been at Veka for about 5 years now. It'll be 5 years actually next week. So a little bit about Veka. Veka is a vinyl extrusion manufacturer, global. So specifically though, in the United States, we have 4 locations. And we're based out of our Pennsylvania location, just Farm Bell, Pennsylvania, which is just north of Pittsburgh. Yeah, so what we're doing is we're not direct to consumer vinyl manufacturer, we're a direct to window manufacturer, right? So what you've seen is if you've gone to Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that, if you walk through their window aisle, you'll definitely see some of our products. So yeah, that's Veka. I'm part of the digital transformation team, so I've been kind of taking the lead. Thank you. Taking the lead on that. So yeah, I've been there for 5 years. That's what we're doing.
Great, thanks. Mary, how about you?
No, thank you, and appreciate the invitation to be here today. So, Mary McDonald, I've been with AWS, so Amazon Web Services. So, Operations Calling is powered by AWS. So, we're one of the leading cloud providers in the world for those cloud services. So I am a business development principal in support of manufacturing and supply chain. I just celebrated 5 years with AWS about a week ago, but I have a couple of decades strictly in manufacturing and automation, so understand that OT world pretty well. So I've worked for companies such as Rockwell Automation, Emerson Process, Schneider Electric, OSI Soft, OSI turned Aviva, turned Schneider again. So really have an appreciation for how that part of the world works. And what I do is I support our teams who help our customers in their cloud and cloud transformation journey. We take a look at, what are those, hard use cases that, as I heard this morning, how do they put money on the bottom line? How do we get this actual revenue versus, just this cost center? So I think a lot with my background of, growing up on the factory floor with all those automation systems. And now on this side, I really take a hard look at, how do we accelerate that journey?
Great, thanks. Well, first question's over to you. Can you share a little bit of context for how and why you and Bloom Energy started this digital transformation journey and how you think about prioritizing some of the projects?
Yeah, for sure. So, the major reason why we needed to transform our entire infrastructure in Bloom Energy was scale, right? We were growing at almost 2x rate or 3x rate on a year-by-year basis. And that was not scalable with the processes that we had. We still had, obviously, as everyone knows, the replacement for MES system, replacing the paper systems that are in place, transactions in our ERP system were all done manually. Someone literally had to, every time a product moved down the line, do 15 or 20 transactions on that unit as it moved down the line. And if you're building something like 30 or 40 of these units a day, I mean, you can imagine the amount of indirect labor that you would need to do all these transactions. So the scaling of our manual processes into something a lot more automated is what we needed. So we actually had a previous MES system also, and that wasn't meeting that scalability and the flexibility requirement. So we set off on this journey to do this digital transformation. So one of the reasons, at the end of these financial closing periods, like at the end of quarter or year end, right, we'd always be scrambling for, there'd be people staying up until like 11, 12, right until the midnight deadline to do these transactions, make sure everything's secure. And then, we really needed to clean that up. We needed to automate that and fix that.
You're certainly not alone. I've heard that story a lot of times. But I think the context is a little bit different because Bloom's was a startup or is kind of in that startup and that scale-up phase. Pranav, I know Veka is not a startup, but I would love to hear your kind of the context for digital transformation, at your company and kind of how you guys got started on this journey and the reasons why.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, Veka is not a startup. We've been in the States for 41 years, so we're pretty established there. But pretty similar problem where our digital did not meet our physical. So what we wanted to do was actually understand what was going on, and our first approach was attacking a problem that was pretty common. So we were seeing a customer return that was across the board, across all of our customers. And so what we wanted to do was say, all right, well, we understand how to solve the problem, but it was a matter of what can we use to solve that problem, and that's where Tulip came into play. On top of that, what we saw was, we have a pretty older workforce in our production floor, and they're getting to the age of retirement. So we were like, all right, how do we bring a platform, a solution that then allows for the younger group that's coming in to be able to keep that knowledge of that older group that's leaving, right? So a lot of tribal knowledge, a lot of, knowledge is walking out that door, but we can't be successful if it just leaves, right? So Tulip allows us to kind of transfer that over as well, right? So that was our digital transformation journey.
Sure, thanks for sharing. Again, from my perspective, these perspectives aren't unique, but Mary would love to hear from, if these are consistent from what you see working with clients and kind of how you see some of your customers and clients starting off in this journey and kind of their path.
Yeah, no, these are very, very consistent. I would say the top use cases that I get pulled in to have a look at is one with just a lot of equipment efficiency, so OEE, and then the other one is heard in the last panel, a lot of quality. But they're both kind of directly related to worker productivity. And how folks need or how they know how those systems work or don't. We see a lot too of the you either have a 6-month or 2-year type of worker in the factory, or you have a 20 or 30 year, and now that has a lot to do with the skill gaps that we have, and so how do we improve those? So with, as I heard in the last session too, it's just like a lot of folks who have YouTube degrees. So the good news is if we want to try and accelerate the workers, the workers today are digitally native. I mean, they grew up with mobile phones in their cribs and with iPads. That's how they learned. And so let's kind of take advantage of that with the technology that is available. So we can now take that 6-month employee and accelerate them to a 2-year, a 2-year to 5-year, a 5-year to 10-year. And then along the way, we're capturing all of that tribal knowledge and putting it back into the system so that now I don't have to immediately remember why, what is error 57? All I have to do is ask the system, what is error 57? Oh, and how do I fix it? Give me some ideas of how to do that. So in essence, I look at it as it's, Alexa in the manufacturing floor. And so you have your workers that are getting more and more used to the systems and more comfortable with it. But it also, when you start scaling up to, say, a production manager, I need to understand, some root cause analysis about how my lines are differing in their performance from shift to shift or day to day or week to week. Scaling up to the plant manager, I need to know, am I going to make my production run by the end of the week, by the end of the month, by the end of the quarter? And then I want to compare myself against all these different other sites that look like me. So again, using the technology that is so much more available and how that's accelerated for all those different sets.
Yeah, thanks.
So, say putting the fun back in manufacturing.
Yeah, so usually customers come to us and say that, okay, we know that we need to go down this digital transformation journey, but then it's about prioritizing, understanding where do we start. So, I'd love to start with you to understand, how did Bloom Energy and your team kind of think about where do I start? What are the high ROI projects? How do I prioritize this? And how do I get going?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty clear in our company. We had two main objectives. One was the democratization of data. And then the other was we needed to get a better handle on labor and material costs. So I'll start with the first one, democratizing data. I think I said in the event yesterday that in our company we have a quote that MES stands for minimizing emails and spreadsheets. And that's because everyone kind of has their own pockets of spreadsheets, on their computers, and they're the source of that information. And if that person is out of the office or on PTO, then there's no one else to cover for that person, right? And we need to make that data available to everyone, right? And the accuracy of that data might be questionable, right? They may have forgotten a formula in their Excel sheet, or someone else using that data doesn't know how to do it. So that's a big risk. Then that was a big risk for us, and I'm sure it is for a lot of you guys as well. The second part of that is a manufacturing line was also using emails to communicate with one another. And I'm sure we've all done it, where we go through our Outlook and we look for some information that was sent a week ago and try to retrieve that. Which is fine for a workforce in the back office, but it's not right for a manufacturing line that needs to run on in our case, a 20-minute tack time, right, where a unit is produced every 20 minutes. So we needed to clean that up, and that was our first big initiative. The second one, regarding material and labor cost, I mean, that's inherent to the problem that I mentioned earlier, which is we were doing all these manual transactions in our ERP system. How can you possibly have an accurate inventory or consumption to your material cost for your end product if you are doing these transactions manually hours after they happen physically, right? You'll have cycle count issues, you'll have material variances in your costs, and then capturing labor. That's just the non-starter for using when you're using paper travelers or paper data. You need a digital system to keep track of that labor cost.
So it sounds like I think accuracy, scalability, reliability were like some of the key dimensions that you all thought about in terms of like, what do I go tackle first, right?
Yeah.
Pranav, would love to hear from you and what the VECA team kind of prioritized, and how do you tackle the big projects, and what did you guys start with, and really see where the ROI lay?
Yeah, so we knew what the big project that we wanted to do first was because of that customer return, but beyond that, what we did was we separated all of our applications into two major buckets. One being what we're using Tulip's language, what we're calling business critical applications. So it was talking to our ERP, it was talking to our MES. It was kind of like, there's a lot more work behind it. And then we separated the other bucket as quality of life applications. So this was just really getting buy-in on the floor, helping the day-to-day user, something that a citizen developer at our team could develop pretty quick and easy. From there, though, what we did was, I don't know if there's a slide on this. So what we did was we actually took those business critical applications and we did the not so sexy part of Tulip, which was we put it all on paper, digital paper, I guess, an Excel sheet, right? But we're creating a control plan that says, hey, here's our process step. Here's what the impact of that process step is and what applications kind of flow through that, right? So this was really important for us because it allowed us to kind of merge different areas and understand, all right, what is truly happening and how does it truly affect us? And that's from there, we were able to understand, here's the projects that come along with the projects being applications that are related there.
Sure. Makes sense. And yeah, thanks for sharing. It's, it's usually good for people to just react to how, others have kind of gone down a similar path. Mary, I would love to hear kind of how you work with customers and when making sure that they get the return on their investment with Tulip or other types of technologies along the digital transformation journey.
Yeah, it's a flip slide.
Oh,
no, maybe it didn't make it.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no, it's okay. So from the AWS perspective, we're not looking at ripping and replacing. I mean, the systems that we see in place, I mean, they've been there for 20, 30 years. So how are we going to help you really take advantage of what you currently have and then add more things along the way? So first I want to take a look at, let's inventory. Where are you on your transformation journey? How have you pulled apart, going from the big, monolithic pyramid into start investigating some of those, consumable, composable pieces until you get to the, I want to say a final journey, but an advanced journey of microservices put together. And then we take a look at, so you found those different pieces, but now, what do you want to solve? And so number one, I always look at, so where does your data sit? Where is that single source of truth? Because if you don't have that, then the rest of the system, just hallucinates and doesn't tell you what it is that you need to know. So I take a look at it from a, let's inventory, let's see where you are. And then I want to take a look at, who are your partners? We work, a ton with, say, Tulip and High-Byte. I mean, I've seen more progression these last couple of years with these types of tools than I've seen in the last 20 with all the different process systems that we have. So it really comes down to, one, where is your single source of truth? How does that play into setting your priorities? And then let's take a look at your inventory of partners who some are going to be legacy, some are going to be there. They're there for the journey, but let's take a look at some of our newer partners and how they can accelerate you through that.
Great, thanks. As I'm sure many people in the room probably experienced that once you've kind of decided you're going to go along this digital transformation journey and maybe start prioritizing use cases or projects to go tackle, building a consensus within your organization, whether it's a single site or a global organization, is no small feat or task. Mary, I actually want to go back to you and if you can maybe help provide a perspective in terms of how the challenges you've seen some of your customers run into and how they've navigated building consensus within their own organizations.
Yeah, so again, building on something I heard in the last session, I mean, it's all about communication. But so much more of that too is the vocabulary that we're using. And I liken it to, okay, so if we're all speaking English, in the U.S., well, but different words, different phrases you'll hear in the Northeast versus the Southeast. If somebody says, bless your heart in the Southeast, it's probably not a compliment, much like people would think that it's in the Northeast. And then they say it differently in Minnesota versus down in Louisiana or Texas. So again, we're all saying the same thing, but it's different. And so the first thing, I take a look at is just, one, are we using that same vocabulary? Just, part of my learning was when I say process automation on the manufacturing side, it means something completely different when I go to the carpet side of the house and say that, because they mean automating workflows. Or the big one for me was RPA, robotic process automation. Had nothing to do with a big robot on the factory floor. So one, which is let's have a meeting. And a lot of times I play the role of, just the magic decoder ring and just saying, what number one, let's start with the goals we have, and then let's align our strategies and how we want to, set our budgets, because is this going to be an internal or an external, type of ROI? But again, let's get all the vocabulary right so that we can set those proper goals.
Got it. Thanks. I think in previous discussions too, we discussed kind of about the IT side of the house as well, and making sure there's consensus there. Any additional comments in terms of that? Because IT/OT tension is usually very present, at least in my customer interactions, and it's a healthy tension. But any final or any additional comments there?
Yeah, I'll say it's not always a healthy tension, but yeah, no. Just say, look, IT is your partner. And there was another session, another event that I went to a couple of weeks ago, and somebody, outwardly said on a panel, it's just like, don't ever involve IT. It's like, no. I mean, again, with the cloud technology that's available and all the things that you can hook onto that, it's just going to it can and will make your life easier. So get with your IT partner. I mean, our systems in manufacturing work better when you have that supporting set. And by the way, they got a lot of budget. So let's figure out how to use it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, next question is for you. You shared that you came from the manufacturing side and actually transitioned into IT, so that might be an advantage. I don't know. Maybe you can kind of share your perspective on building consensus across both sides of those organizations.
Yeah, for sure. Everything that Mary said really resonates with me because that's exactly, this question is I feel like it was made for me. Like transitioning from the manufacturing side and operations into IT, right? The role that I'm in was actually created for this same exact reason that Mary describes, to be the translator between IT speak and manufacturing speak, because they don't speak the same language always, right? So I kind of play the ambassador between the two teams, translating that message between the two, and then coordinating and executing, being there in the middle. So it's definitely relevant to my case here.
Yeah, and just again, coming from my perspective, working with customers, it's very helpful when you have like that close coordination with IT and OT to help kind of collaborate. Because that truly is like the consensus building. And it's not always easy, but when it does work, it really works and helps accelerate just across the board. Not just with Tulip, it helps with like the overall digital transformation and tech stack, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Can I just say that, when during our implementation of Tulip as an example in our organization, what really drove the success was the collaboration between the COO and the CIO. Right? They were in the same page. They were in the same meetings where we were giving status updates. They were always on the same page with the implementation timeline and objectives that were there, and really having that consensus up top, driving the change from both sides, meant there was very little resistance in change, right, between the two organizations, and that was just fantastic. And if you ever have an implementation plan in your company where you need to do something similar, like a large-scale software implementation that involves multiple teams, getting leadership involved and making sure that they're collaborating is very important.
Sure. Now, Pranav, you had mentioned the control plan that and we shared what that visually looks like, but can you help us understand a little bit how that helped make sure that everyone was speaking the same language within your organization and kind of how that helped build consensus and drive alignment?
Yeah. So part of that screen was blurry, but there was actually a section in there for data architecture. So the purpose of that was really to say, all right, well, here's our OT team and where that OT data is going towards, and here's our IT team and what the ERP data is going towards. So really combining the two and letting people know, here's what's a reference, here's what's being stored, here's what's a database, all of that is how we were able to kind of say, all right, bringing that OT and IT tension to as minimal as possible.
Sure. And then Wout, back over to you. We often talk about how to scale, a digital solution across many sites, but still maintaining some amount of, control or governance. Can you help just like describe what that scalability looks like in your organization, and how it also in the same theme of, building consensus and alignment?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we're still, in our company, we're still kind of in the growth phase of that governance process, right? So we're, we've only in the past few years, established the source of truth of our ERP system, really driven the analytics side to measure what matters on the floor, and then we're now feeding that data in, right? So now that we have the infrastructure in place, we're scaling, right, as you're saying, and that's now becoming a challenge for us, right? And so, yeah, we've put a lot of governance, in place for the development of these systems, and so it's really important that, even though you have a lot of players in the game, they all need to be playing by the same rules, and it's important to make those rules clear from the get-go, because obviously if you then scale, no matter what software you're using, you're going to end up with people with pocketed spreadsheets or pocketed versions of whatever software that is, as I said earlier.
Sure. I mean, we often advocate that you don't need to have all of the answers solved. When we're bring it back to the context of a roadmap, but you don't have to have all the answers solved on day one. But having the forethought to know that you're going to run into those challenges, I think, is like the key insight. And then being able to grow into that scale, I think, is also is pretty important. So in that, I think it's a good segue actually, kind of into the next line of topic here around architecture and integrations. Because obviously that's a very important part of digital transformation and having that forethought in terms of the roadmap. So, Mary, over to you in terms of, how do you advise customers or how do you think about yourself on when to integrate systems and which ones to integrate first?
Yeah, so it still goes back to that that single source of truth and where is that data located. But I'll say a lot of times, so I also do fulfillment center tours. And, we kind of start with, because it's just, sometimes they can be just very overwhelming and just, how did this whole thing get started? Oh, by the way, we have Prime Day going on. Little plug. The statement of, so if you knew the source, or to say, if you knew the state of everything in your operations, what problems would you solve? Which goes back to with that single source of truth. And if I knew what my state was, well, then I know then how to prioritize what it is that I need to next solve. So is this going to be an internal problem or is it an external problem? But if I knew the state of it, which then gets back to, like I said, that single source of truth. But then once you decide what that priority is, get that POC launched. And we talked, another panel was talking about, you can create the sandbox without a lot of risk. And, especially, with Tulip, you're running on AWS. So you set it up. If it didn't work, you shut it down. It's all back to pay for what you use, and we just start again. And you just look at it as either you win or you learn, and then you just iterate on top of that. One of the best pieces of advice when I'm trying to take folks through this, so where do we start, and how does this need to look? It's look again, launch that POC, and launch it in an area where you're not trying to boil the ocean. Let's start off with where people are behind it. They want to see change, and you get it moving. And again, and then you'll probably learn a few things along the way, and then you prove to everybody, hey, yeah, that this stuff can work, and we can scale it. And this could be, worth something, that we would take throughout the rest of the organization, because otherwise it just becomes too overwhelming. I mean, we didn't build, 700 fulfillment centers overnight. There was a lot of, learning and iterating on every single one of those, on every single piece of that journey. So again, get that POC moving so that you don't end up in pilot purgatory, and then you get people behind it, to want to make it work.
Got it. Pranav, zooming in on a specific company now, can you share a couple words around how Vecca is thinking about your tech stack, within digital transformation and manufacturing, and how you guys are kind of thinking about this from, maybe the early days, but also kind of where you are today?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the hardware tech stack first. So mentioned earlier, Vecca was 41 years old. So that means that some of the equipment on our production floor is also 41 years old. So getting the green light from my boss to say, hey, look, let's change some stuff on the floor, specifically with hardware. I'll mention scales, calipers, you name it. We were able to say, okay, well, let's replace that, and let's replace it with stuff that's already working with Tulip pretty easily, with the idea of saying, if it works really well with the application and then the end user can kind of not put too much effort and time around it, then it's really easy for them to get kind of sticky to the application and want to use it more and more, right? So hardware side, right, was just let's find stuff that works and talks to Tulip really easily. On the software side, we kind of separated where the ERP was our record of truth, where we're saying, all right, well, we're not touching the ERP. We only want to feed the ERP system and read from the ERP system. So everything else, though, was fair game to either be replaced by Tulip or it had to talk to Tulip. So for the most part, though, I'll being honest, I think we did the destructive way where we said, all right, let's just take everything and just replace it with Tulip. And we're in the process of doing that now, which is good. I mean, that's part of the platform that allows you to kind of to replace some of that stuff that's out there, that old stuff that you don't really need out there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, can you share some examples of some of that equipment that you replaced and how that maybe brought operator buy-in in terms of making their lives easier? Because honestly, a lot of customers we work with, sometimes, the hardware side of things might be more of an afterthought because we're so excited about like, let's go build apps. But then it's more of like, how do you bridge that gap between the digital and the physical, which is really the purpose, right? We're serving the operators, we're making human-centric applications, but also the devices that they use to accomplish their jobs, be more efficient and make their lives better. Any comments on like what type of things you thought about and how even lessons learned on that topic?
Yeah, going back to those scales and calipers. So our previous process before was the operator would use the scale. They'd write down that number that they saw on the scale. Then they would take the caliper, take the length of the piece that they were getting. The end goal was to get a grams per meter weight measurement. So then they would take those two numbers, put them in a calculator, and then get their final result, right? So if you got somebody that's pretty, savvy with it, maybe it might take them a minute or two. Whereas the application now, with the integration of the scale and the calipers, takes about maybe 2 seconds. You're saving a lot more time, right? We do that measurement probably at least 40 times per shift, so 80 times per day, right? So now we're talking about a good amount of time that they save because of that.
Probably a better working experience as well, not having to do that I don't know, what I'm assuming is like a not super great task to do the measurement.
Oh yeah, we definitely hear it. If anything gets unplugged, they definitely hit us up first right away.
For sure. Well, would love to hear kind of how Bloom Energy is thinking about your overall tech stack architecture.
Yeah, sure. I think there's also a slide for that. It's very basic for the the manufacturing side tech stack. We settled on AWS as our primary source here for integrations and data management. So we've really ramped up QuickSight use. So knowing that our end source would be QuickSight, right? We're using AWS's S3, Redshift, and the MySQL RDS databases to pull the data from Tulip and also from our ERP. It's kind of the middleman. So our team wanted to have a contingency should an integration with the ERP go down, that we would not be able to stop production. And so we have this middle system in between that kind of houses that data, and so then we build an integration between Tulip and then that middle database, and then between the middle database and our ERP system, and so we can kind of act independently of our ERP system should that connection go down. And yeah, so we're heavily using like the Tulip's APIs through Lambda functions, pulling that data over, and then also Tulip's native SQL connectors to push that data through. And that allows us to have real-time dashboarding then for the manufacturers on the floor, but then also clean up that data for use in Redshift for our enterprise data platform for other teams.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, I think this, like having a reference architecture is such a critical piece, especially going all the way back to building consensus and buy-in across your organization, across IT and OT. But you don't always have to start here. I don't know if you guys had this on day one. We often see that customers don't, and that's okay. You grow into it. I mean, any comments along that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely grew into this. Yeah, this doesn't all happen at once. I think last year, we had AWS actually as a consulting partner that helped design some of this infrastructure for us and gave us some recommendations on the route we should take. And so over time, we kind of settled on this, but we always knew that QuickSight was going to be our visualization tool, and that kind of helped. So we were like, okay, so how can we format data to be usable by QuickSight as our BI tool? So.
Sure. Pranav, the next question is over to you around automations. I mean, at Tulip, that's a new kind of core capability or feature set that's been developed within the last year. And would love, we know that you guys are using it for some pretty interesting stuff. Would love to hear how your company is thinking about automations in terms of enabling this type of integrations and your overall tech stack.
Yeah, so going back to that quality of life and making sure people want to continue using those applications. So what we did was we used automations to kind of take some load off our applications. So if you had a looper that was just running nonstop, so we have a bunch of dimensions that need to get evaluated against. So I don't know if I'm allowed to give a number out there, right? So let's just say over 50 dimensions out there, and each one of those dimensions need to get evaluated against its spec. A looper within the application could take about 5 minutes, right? But what we did was we took that, turned it into an automation that then, it handles that load outside of an application. So then it's almost like a blink of an eye for the end user at that point. And then on top of that, we're using automations to, I mentioned before, replace other platforms and other softwares that are out there. So those automations are being used to replace some of that monotonous tasks that those applications did.
And also some ERP, like Tulip ERP transactions, right?
We are using some of it for that, specifically to send some emails over to people.
Yep.
It's actually a pretty simple task where it reads our ERP, understands the last calibration date, and then sends it in email form to the end user. But yeah, there's some of that.
Awesome. So the next section here is kind of lessons learned, which hopefully is insightful for the crowd in terms of maybe a day in the life of other people's shoes before we open up to the questions. So start thinking of anything you may want to ask. Mary, I think I'll start with you in terms of kind of what surprises have you encountered along the way working with different customers?
I'll say one thing that I'm glad that does continue if a lot of folks are wanting to do it. You learn so much just walking shoulder to shoulder with people up and down a plant floor and just learning and asking questions. And I'm glad that part doesn't change because people are usually very welcoming because you're interested in what they're doing. So it's like seek first, understand before you can be understood. And so that part I'm glad continues. What I'm surprised is not enough folks sometimes from the carpet side come over and want to learn. So I'll say, believe it or not, I still have my steel-toed shoes at home. Be willing to travel, and that's just what you have to do because that's where you're going to see where actually things are happening. So I'm surprised that hasn't happened. What I'm so glad that has happened is now that the systems and I'll say technology has improved to the point where we have these composable operations. We're now able to actually solve things without having this big monolithic MES system that is never done. It's so expensive, and then who continues to maintain it? And what I try to do is encourage folks that it's like, yeah, you can take those next steps, and the technology's there. You don't have to be afraid of it. I mean, so we have well over 700 fulfillment centers worldwide that are powered by this system that can help you move so much more much more quickly. And I'll say I'm just surprised that that hasn't taken on. So maybe there's a whole lot more myth busting that we have to do, but it's definitely worth it.
Sure. Well, same question over to you. Like, what surprises have you encountered along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, this session is called digital transformation, but really you can't do a digital transformation without also a cultural transformation. The adoption of the technology that you put in place for a digital transformation really needs to be received well by the end user, right? Oftentimes it's an IT team or an executive team making a decision. Okay, we need to do a digital transformation because that's the hot topic in industry right now, right? And then you go and implement, and it's like the end users, they're like, I don't want this. This is not what I wanted. You really have to have their needs in mind. Solve the problem you're trying to solve. Don't just implement technology for the sake of implementing technology.
Got it. Pranav, I guess what advice would you give to somebody sitting in the room that's trying to go through this journey?
Yeah, so I know that you guys are probably tired of hearing me mention this control plane over and over again. But in all honesty, I think it's going to be where if you focus on the not so sexy side of Tulip, right, the stuff that's where you're mapping out what you're actually trying to impact and accomplish, spend a lot more time in that part of it. You'll see that your applications kind of move really fast and easy. So an example was prior to us really focusing on the control plan, it took us maybe a month or two to deploy an application. Whereas now, speaking to our Golden Shovel winner, Ryan over here, we went over that control plan. He created an application within one day. The following week, it was deployed on our production floor. And it's been successful running ever since, right? And I know this because he looks at it all the time to make sure everything's good. Right? So I would say, just like the keynote speaker, who I can't remember his name, and I feel kind of bad about doing that, but just like that keynote speaker said about it's really easy to make those applications. The application part is pretty fast and nice. But if you do the boring stuff first, it'll make things really smooth and easy. I think that's just like how life in general usually is, though. So there's some life advice in that too.
Life advice. I feel like you're gonna pay for that.
Just to add to that, I call it, we got to get the plumbing right. If the plumbing's right, the rest of it doesn't work, and it's going to hallucinate. It's going to do all those things. And I'll say, I talk about it, a lesson learned. Even the, when you want to ask your factory assistant, why did this pump just turn red? Well, if you don't have the plumbing right in the background, if you don't have the contextualized data, if you don't have that single source of truth, it's not going to give you the information back. So you got to do the boring stuff first. Make sure everything is connected so that you're going to get the answers back out.
Yeah, I think that's a good life advice, but also good digital transformation advice. Maybe they're connected. Any other final thoughts here on like kind of lessons learned before we move over to questions to the audience?
All good.
All good. All right. Would love to open it up for the remaining time that we have to any questions in the audience, if there's any at all.
So I guess like question for all four of you. What is one thing that Tulip does not have that all of you guys wish it had as of today?
Data visualization. I think the dashboards are good enough, but I think we can attest to if Tulip is not a platform to mimic Power BI and Tableau and all that kind of stuff out there, but if that was there, man, icing on the cake would be for sure. Sorry.
No, that's good.
That was quick.
Make sure the PM here sees us recording.
I guess I can go. I can't really think of one at the moment, but we use Tulip. As was said also this morning in the presentation, Tulip can be used for way more than just MES system, right? Like you could easily make it a QMS system or a WMS system and things like that. So my answers would be in the realm of those areas. Where there's definitely functionality that's tangential to Tulip that it may not have functionalities for yet, but I can't say that's something that it doesn't have, right? Because it's not trying to yet be those things, even though we're using it as such.
Cool. Thanks for the question. What else?
What are some inflection points that you've seen where it's time to shift gears, to grow, to scale? For example, for reference right now, we're using Tulip, but it's really just at one side. We've got a lot of smaller calculation apps, and I'm working on a batch records app. But there's a lot of potential there. How do we know when to move or what should we look for?
I've got an answer. I'm going to let you all
Yeah, I was going to say, it depends on what your problem is, right? You want to solve the problem. You don't want to implement Tulip for the sake of implementing Tulip, right? So what's your problem? Are you trying to make the work more efficient for the operator? Then, explore ways to do that. Or are you having accuracy issues with measurements or communication with ERP? Then attack that problem. That would just be my advice, identify the problem you're trying to fix before just implementing.
I think our approach was a little bit different, where what we did was we kind of, we used our headquarters in Pennsylvania as our, lighthouse location. And what we did was we brought in key influencers and key individuals from the sister sites, the subsidiaries. And we just kind of used it as eye candy. And we were like, hey, look at all that you can do. Because they all know what problems they have and what solutions they want to get to. So we kind of just took that approach of like, look what you could have if you just, did the boring stuff first.
And I was going to say, just with the eye candy is great, but we also don't do technology for technology's sake. The next part is, so what value is it going to bring? What did you just solve by doing that? Is it, keeping, workers retained? Is it, being able to track your production? Is it being able to get more quality, out the door? So that, and you work backwards from that, then that'll tell you what line you need to be chasing.
Yeah, I think those are all great answers, and it goes back to what problem are you trying to solve? What's the value you got for it? It sounds like it's almost you went and tackled a single problem. There was a slide that Natan showed where it's x-axis is time, and then there's incremental blocks, and they build up over time. And I think that's really what you're probably at that inflection point of, hey, how do we scale this to other sites? At what point do we what are the next use cases? And it goes back to the whole theme of this is the roadmap. So what are those next pools of value that you need to go solve for, and then why do people care? And then going back to tying it all together, do the boring stuff first, right? So how now are you going to stitch together the solution that you build, Tulip plus others, right? I'm not advocating that Tulip's the center of your tech stack. Digital transformation is going to require probably many tools in the context of your business. And And so it's thinking, yeah, doing the boring stuff first and thinking through what's the next step and then the next step after that and what's the value that it's going to achieve. And again, it's also building internal consensus as well. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Yes, sir.
It's actually a pretty good segue, I would say, because you touched on this already, but for Wout and Pranav, the subtitle of this hour is, "Are we there yet?" Are you there yet? And if not, how much further do you need to go, and how far is Tulip going to take?
Oh man, I don't know how much time we have because I have so the short answer is we're not fully deployed everywhere in our sister sites yet. The reason for that is outside of Tulip, we had some hardware issues where, other stuff happened. But in terms of I think the buy-in of having Tulip in those subsidiaries, I believe that we are there for that moment. So the other subsidiaries, the other general managers are ready to kind of consume what we've done at the Lighthouse.
Yeah, I'd say we're definitely not there yet. It depends on, I'm going to be political here and say it depends on your scope of digital transformation. If digital transformation in our company is way more than just Tulip implementation. So, with regard to Tulip implementation, yes, we've laid down base foundation in almost all the manufacturing areas, but now we want to integrate tools to that. And now we want to do more machine monitoring and stuff, which is like layering on top of that foundation. With regards to digital transformation in general, we still have a lot of work to do. With regards to data management, democratization of data, getting rid of people hoarding their spreadsheets, and coming up with difficult end results. If we have an executive presentation, it's not just going to a dashboard and pulling the chart. It's contacting 5 different people over the course of 2 weeks to try to get all the charts and data together for the presentation, right? So those are the kind of high-level business challenges that we still need to work through.
I know you directed that to Pranav and Wout. I'm actually maybe a little provocative here. I would say that you're probably never there yet. Digital transformation is an evolution. Your operations, manufacturing's messy. Your operations are always going to change. So what's true today is going to be different than 6 months from now, 10 years, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. And so I think with the tools that you have available today, that you're able to respond to those changes much more rapidly. But it does require evolution of the roadmap. It's always continuous improvement. What else? Anything? Cool. Any parting thoughts?
The boring stuff first. That's what
there you go.
That's it.
Awesome.
Now, I was just going to say, just to end, you're never there. What there is there. But we take a look at this. It's like we want you, to continue to push us and say what's not there yet. I mean, the whole reason AWS even came about was because the retail business could not function as it was. It was server on top of server on top of server, and that gets expensive. And then you don't always need it all the time, and then you got to refresh the whole thing again. And so it's all about so we had to create something that wasn't yet available, and it was completely, I want to say, anti to how everybody was trained to put a data center together. And so with that comes all these new things that people, well, what if I could do this, or what if I could do that? What if I can create this new product with this new technology? So it's just the encouragement of just please continue to push us, the AWS, Tulip, as I've heard, your support system is just amazing. You get answers within minutes, even with stuff that, as I heard, hasn't been touched in a year and a half. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, that's always the type of thing that's just like, gosh, you really feel like you're in it with us.
Great. Well, thank you to all of you for joining this session, and thanks for our panelists for the insights and this great discussion. I think I'll conclude this session and let you get off to the next event. Thank you.
Thank you.